answers about the other part of your final that you take on final exam day. So you guys will take it Tuesday, May 23rd. You are allowed to use an index card, but you have to turn it in at the end of testing. The review is modeled after the actual test, just different numbers. And the blue puzzle piece will go in as missing if you don't turn it in. And the last time to turn it in is Monday by midnight. No exceptions. I'm not sinking Schoology after that. So then, yeah, questions before we jump into it? All right, what requests from the review? Number 14. Okay, so an Olympic high diver uses a springboard to leap in the air to perform a forward double somersault. The expression there is written to represent the height and feet of the diver T seconds after he jumps. Based on this expression, what's the height of the springboard? So when you are jumping off a diving board, like what motion are you going in? Okay, like show me with like your fingers or something.
Up and down.
Okay, so that's a what type of function? Okay, and that fits because really in this semester, all we focused on were quadratic and exponential. Sorry. So something in this motion. And we're trying to figure out what's the height and feet of the springboard. So that would be where in this picture? Okay, you think they put the springboard up here?
Oh no, at the
So bottom left is where the springboard is. So we're trying to find where that is, and then she's jumping up and then landing. So the way that you solve this, I would think is to graph it. It's probably the easiest way. And then we're trying to figure out, like, look at that part of the graph when you graph it. So let's see. Okay, so negative 16x squared plus 16x. And then plus 10. So notice I changed the t's to x's. T is for time, so that would go on your x-axis. And the negative values would really make no sense, right? So don't look at the negatives. You can't have negative time. You can't have negative height. So really, we're just looking in this first quadrant. And where she starts is where the springboard would be, right? So at that, the time is 0. And the height is what? Okay. So that's how you do that one. And that happens to be one of the answers. Has anyone turned it in yet? Is it 10 for that one? Okay. Easy peasy then. You just have to know where on the graph to look. So sometimes, listen, sometimes they want like where you're starting at. Sometimes they want like when it hits the ground, what time is it at? Sometimes it wants what's your maximum height. You just have to know like what portion you need to look at. And I think the most logical sense is how you can best figure that out. So any other questions from your review? Number 8. All right, so the length of a rectangle is 3 inches less than 2 times the width. The area of the rectangle is 256 square inches. Write an equation describing the relationship between W, the width of the rectangle in inches, and the area in square inches. So for this one, you need to know like the basic formula for area of a rectangle. What is it? Okay, good. So that you would need to know if you don't put it on the note card and bring that note card. Does it tell me anything about what the area is? So I'm gonna plug that in. Then it says for the length. All right, see where it describes the length. The length is 3 inches less than 2 times the width. Now, does it say anywhere else like what the width is? No, it just says that they want to use W for width. So that will have to be an expression then. So the length equals 3 inches less than 2 times the width. So less than is what operation? So is it gonna be 3 minus 2 times the width or 2 times the width minus 3? Okay, good. Less than is subtraction, and then that than, I always call it like a switch word. You will then switch the order if you see than. All right, this is kind of the rule, because it should be smaller, it should be taken away from the 2 times the width. Okay, so that's what my length is. I'm gonna plug that in for the length. And then we still have to multiply it by the width, which they said is W. So you have to have both of those parts. Question so far? It is translating it. Then notice none of my answer options have parentheses, so they probably want us to distribute that W. So do that. What's QW times W? Good, and then -3 times W. Good, I'm gonna bring this down. And which option does this best match? Good, and I have also seen it where they also will put it equal to 0, so just in case that pops up on your final. How would I make this equal to 0? Good, and I'm gonna do one side, do to the other side. So another way that it could possibly be written, but it's still the same or equivalent, is like that. So sometimes they take it a step further and set it equal to 0. Sometimes they just leave it like your answer option. So just kind of take a peek. If you're not seeing your answer option, see if it could be written another way. So questions on that one? Questions on others? Number 12. So then identify the exact solution to x squared plus 12x plus 15 equals 0. We have learned a bunch of different methods to solve quadratics. That's what this is because of the x squared. What method would you use if my answer options look like this? So the question was, of all the methods we've learned, there was factoring, graphing, quadratic formula. So when my answer options look like this, the best option to use might be. I agree. There's also a way you could verify with a graph, because I know you guys just like to type it in and look, but then you have to know how to type these into the graph also to compare. All right, but I will give you the quadratic formula on your final, so you don't need to put it on your note card unless you're putting in like an example of how to use it. But yes, using this formula, you have to make sure that the given part is set equal to 0 and in standard form. Is it? Yes. Okay, great. If not, you need to make it that way. Then you identify your A, B, and C. What's my A? 1. What's my B? And what's my C? 15. So then you plug it into the formula just like that. Like I would not skip that step. And anytime you plug stuff in, I always tell you to use parentheses and Desmos, but parentheses. Otherwise, the Desmos will tell you the wrong answer. So just plugging it in. What goes here where my mouse is? Okay, good. What about here? And what about here? And then all of this is over 2 times what? Okay. So I would not skip that step. Just plug it in, use your parentheses. Then you can start simplifying. So I have a negative 12, there's no double negative there, so it's just negative 12. Plus or minus this, which would need to go in the calculator, this part. I'll use the one that's in here, if I can, if it lets me click on it. But I would type that whole under the square root symbol all at once. So 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 15. Okay, so 84 is under that square root symbol. Notice that it's not in any of the answers, but I'll show you why it's not. Also, 84 is not a perfect square, right? Okay, so that's why we're just gonna leave it under the radical for now. And the denominator is 2 times 1. Now, notice that's not any of our answer options. So, and there's no denominator in our answer option. So what they must have done was simplify. They found a GCF between all their terms. So they divided each term by 2, essentially. So what's negative 12 divided by 2? Okay, so that narrows us down to 2 options. Then we need to simplify that radical. Do you guys remember how to do that? You make a factor tree and then, basically look for pairs, all that stuff. So what are 2 numbers that multiply to 84? 42 and 2. All right, 2 is prime, but 42 is not. What multiplies to 42? 21 and 2. And then 21 is not prime. 21 breaks into 32. All right, now the ends of my branches are all prime numbers now. They can't be broken down further except 1 in itself. I'm going to cross these out so you don't look at them anymore. Okay. And remember, I want you to pretend that that radical symbol is like a jail. So in order to escape the jail, you need a partner. So, like I have a pair of 2s here. So a 2 gets to escape. I only have 1 pair of 2s. If there were multiple pairs, you multiply it. But then I have the 7 and 3. They don't have a partner. So they're stuck in the jail. And then you would multiply them together. What is 7 times 3? 21. Okay. So that stays in the jail because, they don't have a partner. And then if I did the 2 divided by 2, that gives me what? Well, it cancels out to 1. So that's why my denominator disappeared. And then when you have like a number with a radical, like if I did 2 over 21 divided by 2, this cancels. That makes sense? So that's how they're getting as their final answer this. Because they simplify the radical, and then 2 could go into all of the terms. So it should be that one. Anyone get that one right? Yeah. Okay. Now, another way you could do it that maybe you might like better than that, because I know that was a long one, is to put it in Desmos, your problem, x squared plus 12x plus 15. All right, and your answers are going to be what we call irrational. They're going to be decimals that go on forever. But then you could, since it's multiple choice, you could plug in your answer options and see which one matches those decimals. So clearly my zeros are negative, so I'm going to want to probably type in only the negative options. If I type in the one that was our answer, so -6 plus the square root of 21, and then -6 minus the square root of 21, these match the decimals I have, don't they? So since it's multiple choice, you could do that with your answer options to find the irrational solutions even by graphing. That makes sense? Okay. So there you go. Any others from the review? Aiden? Number 4. Okay, so average rate of change. That's a good one. It shows up a lot. Whenever you hear average rate of change, you should think of this one formula. What is that formula? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily that. We kind of did it when we estimated the trend line, if you remember. Slope formula is also your average rate of change formula. Okay, so yes, rise over run works if you have a graph. Which I don't have. You could graph this, yes, and then check your graph between where X is 5 and 7. Or you could use this formula, which I normally call this my average rate of change formula. So this I would put on my note card. Because you could use that for more than just like slope. You could use it for any function. If the problem just has to tell you between what intervals. So like this one is telling me between where X is 5 and 7. So for this formula, you need coordinates, right? Well, I don't have those, at least not yet. They do give me the X's. So I could have a coordinate with a 5 for the X, a coordinate with a 7 for the X, and I need to solve for the Y. How could I do that based on what they did?
Plugging 5 and 7 brackets.
Plug it into your function notation equation that they just gave you. So f of 5 equals 4 times 5 squared minus 3, like that. And I did it earlier, so I think I have it memorized. Is it 97? Okay, it is. So don't believe me, try it. I would put this whole right side in the calculator. The left side's just notation. So don't do anything with the left side. Then you do the same thing with the 7. So now do f of 7 equals 4 times 7 squared minus 3. Throw that in your calculator. And I want to say it's 193, but I'm not really sure. So just what's f of 7? Forget something that. 193. All right, so then when they're written as pairs, like as coordinates, 7, 197, and 597, like right there. So now you can label them as x1, y1, x2, y2, and plug it into that formula. So then the way that I labeled it, it's 193 minus 97 on top over 7 minus 5. I know 7 minus 5 is 2. This, I think I need a calculator, but is it 96? Yeah. And then you still need to divide it by 2. And then that gives you your average rate of change as 48. Okay, and I did that earlier, so that's why I remember the answers. I always suggest you use your calculator, even for subtraction. But yeah, questions on that part? Questions on others? I have time for 1 or 2 more. Brian? 20. Okay. So then 20. All right, what are possible values of A and B in which the f of x decreases as the x increases? So first, remember your function notation. It's usually f of x equals y, and x would be your input or output. Input, y would be your output. So when it's saying as f of x decreases, since f of x is my y, kind of think of it that way. So as y is decreasing, x is increasing. So as we're going further to the right, the y's are getting like smaller. So something like that. And I know based off of this given equation, this is what type of function? Okay. It doesn't have an x squared, so it's not quadratic. What's the other type we learned this in this? It's an exponential function. Those are the only two that we learned this semester, exponential and quadratic. So to jog your memory, the most basic exponential function was a times b to the x. And it wants to know which of these combinations would give me something that has it decreasing, so, or decaying, so versus decay. Do you guys remember what it would have to be for it to be decay? How to tell from looking at the formula? Not necessarily. So let's dissect this. What does A stand for in exponentials? So it's not the total. Give me those. It's your starting amount, so your initial value, initial amount. So that, we don't care what the initial amount is. That will determine what is, if it's increasing or decreasing. The B will determine if it's increasing or decreasing, because B can be 1 plus or minus the rate. So if B is greater than 1, then that must be that it's growing, because it would have been 1 plus something. If B is smaller than 1, then it must be decaying, because it would be 1 minus. Does that make sense? So which of these would have to be decaying? It could be between these bottom two, the B's are both competing in those. I don't know the reasoning for it being the one. So I'll have to look into that. In my opinion, it should be just either of those. But I'll see why in a second. So remind me about it Monday and I can tell you why.
Wait, school here left, and I'm putting my backpack in the dock on the floor and broke. There's something real under stuff, so I was there. Oh, I still lose my mind.
Okay, so it's not C because that's the graph it would give, which you are not decreasing, you're growing. So that's why it's D.